Lesson 17. 2000 years ago the ideal of healing was very simply formulated and expressed in the words "as a man thinketh, so is he." It has taken mankind nearly 20 centuries of bitter toil and struggle upward along the path of evolution to arrive scientifically at the same conclusion. Yet today the attention of medical science is shifting bodily from the well-exploited field of physical research to the comparatively new field of mind, not because of any blind religious faith in the above principle, but because the facts uncovered by physical investigations prove it beyond dispute to be true. There was a time when knowledge did not penetrate beyond the outward physical symptoms of disease. All efforts were concentrated on eliminating those symptoms, of which the cause remained a profound mystery accounted for only by crude theories. Bleeding and leeches were once the common remedy for most ills, being supplanted only gradually by drugs as experiment revealed the greater efficiency of the latter. Discovery of germs and microbes as the first known physical cause behind destructive physical effects was a gigantic upward stride, rolling back narrow mental horizons from the whole vast world of materia medica. From then on progress was rapid. Drugs were succeeded by serums, which in turn yielded precedence to the drugless methods now in use, typified by the so-called nature cures. Up-to-date physicians prescribe plenty of sunshine, fresh air, exercise and relaxation as the best medicine for their patients, while pioneers in the profession, analyzing the healing virtues of natural forces, are more and more introducing into modern therapy vibrations of every sort, such as those of sound, light and color. This had led naturally and inevitably to the consideration of mental vibrations in relation to physical ailments. Suggestion and mental healing, the opening wedge in that direction, have brought about such remarkable revelations that even yet their significance is not wholly grasped. Just as the discovery of germs marked the transition of medical knowledge from outside the body to the minute and teeming world of physical causes within it, so the discovery of mental vibrations has brought humanity to the verge of another far greater transition, the transition from the plane of all material effects to that of the mental causes behind them. Physicians are only now beginning to realize the absolute mastery of mind over body. Experiments have proved with complete certainty that the physical self of an individual is utterly at the mercy of the mental tyrant who rules it. Like a chameleon which always assumes the colors of its surroundings, so the human body always reflects accurately the mental conditions of which it is the host. Disease and ill health, therefore, instead of being due exclusively to destructive physical organisms, as was formerly thought, have their source really in the mind of the individual. Germs themselves are simply the material manifestations of negative influences which originate in mind. A healthy body is the accurate expression, the projection within the range of our perception, of clean and harmonious vibrations. A sick body is the equally accurate expression of the disharmonious thoughts and emotions, such as fear, worry, hatred, jealousy, envy, etc., which lodge in our mental spring and pour their pollution into the harmonious stream of vibrations emanating from it. Science, experimenting in laboratories to determine if possible the extent of this reaction between mind and matter, has made some startling discoveries. For instance, the saliva of an individual has been found to exhibit to an extraordinary degree the effect on it of various mental attitudes. Samples procured when that individual was in a normal undisturbed mood had no effect whatever when injected into the blood of a guinea pig. Other samples obtained when he was under the influence of a strong negative passion, like anger or hatred, caused the guinea pigs inoculated with them to die quickly in terrible convulsions. Again, saliva taken from the same individual when his higher emotions were in the ascendancy, so that he felt loving and kindly, acted as a stimulant to the guinea pig on which it was tried, promoting the activity of the body's cells and thus hastening any healing process, such as of wounds or sores. These experiments show conclusively the thorough control exercised by mind over body. The saliva, transmuted from a neutral fluid into a virulent poison or an active stimulant, according to the mental condition prevailing at that time, is merely typical of a change that pervades the entire system. Evil thinking imparts its bitter taint to the entire material shell that harbors it. Positive thought works into corresponding harmonious expression through every cell and tissue. A sick body mirrors a corrupted mind, a healthy body is the visible evidence and direct result of mental cleanliness and poise. In nature, most readily observable perhaps in dogs, this intimate relation and obedient response between the mental and physical aspects of the animal becomes one of its chief weapons in maintaining its existence. The bite of an angry dog is dangerous, very apt to fester and not infrequently inducing death by blood poisoning. The bite of a mad dog is fatal unless treated promptly. Yet a dog cures his own wounds or the wounds of his mate by licking them, bathing them in the same saliva that under different conditions becomes a poison. All wild creatures instinctively take advantage of a fact for which they need no scientific explanation, making their own medicine as they need it simply by altering their mental attitude to suit the circumstances. The same instinctive recognition of the mental factor in ill health has often strayed remotely through the thoughts of many an invalid, but until very recently has never been brought out squarely into the open. Now disease is being more and more traced directly to its source in wrong mental concepts. The physical disharmony, which drugs and medicines are able to combat but never wholly conquer, is seen to be rooted in negative centers of disturbance in mind which feed and sustain it. Therefore modern therapy seeks to eliminate from the mind everything which is not positive and constructive, as the essential preliminary to enjoyment of a strong and healthy body. One invaluable alien listed by this new phase of the problem is self-interest, which is after all the governing motive in the lives of most people. A patient can no longer throw the burden of responsibility on his doctor. His state of health is decidedly a personal matter, and it is up to him as the author of it to change it by ridding himself of the destructive mental cause. Doctors can help, but genuine physical improvement is conditioned solely on mental and moral improvement first, which cannot be administered in doses by someone else. It must come from within. When human beings realize that to entertain unfriendly thoughts of any kind towards others is to let loose in themselves an enemy to ravage and destroy, they will be less ready to admit hatred, avarice, anger and all other negative emotions. The individual who discharges evil thoughts at an enemy strikes a double blow at himself, because not only does that disharmony permeate first his own system, but the destructive mental vibrations he releases, controlled by certain immutable laws, must return greatly augmented to their point of origin. Ordinary self-protection therefore dictates avoidance of all unkindly thoughts and desires towards our fellow beings, since each is sure to rebound most violently on its author. Ignorance and a very natural desire to dodge unpleasant consequences often leads people to imagine that they can circumvent these natural laws. They believe that they can think, say or do evil to others, yet somehow escape paying the price for it. Even religions have been corrupted in deference to this attitude. Many a Christian, while he prays devoutly "forgive us our debts," finds his enthusiasm wane when he comes to the words, "as we forgive our debtors." But laws of nature, the just and omnipotent expression of the very power to which you address your pleas, distributes the emphasis more equally. Impersonal and immutable, they operate serenely according to their kind, firm against any human will to sway or alter them, and exacting to the utmost farthing satisfaction for every transgression. Everyone knows that if he steps over a cliff he will fall, or if he plunges his hand into the fire he will be burned, no matter how hard he prays or begs the law of gravity or any other laws to be indulgent in his case. Similarly, the greater laws of which these are merely lesser aspects demand inevitably the exact penalty their transgression merits. There is only one way to meet the demands of these laws which govern existence, and that is by correcting any errors which your opposition to them has created. No matter how urgently an individual may beg, implore or entreat, his words are as an idle puff of wind against the iron weight of evil he has deposited in the negative scale of his life. But when that evil is corrected, when an equal measure of positive, constructive action is heaped up to counteract the depressing burden of wrong, then the balance creeps back to normal. He alone can do this, it cannot be accomplished by proxy. Until human beings have learned to understand this clearly, they will continue deliberately to breed the devastating hosts of diseases and ills which assail them on the physical plane. The tendency to evil, and the false optimism its easy prospects inspire, are too strong to be lightly discarded and too tempting to let the eye stray beyond to the price that must be paid. Some strength more sure than the faltering will, some vision more keen than the short-sighted eye of mind, is needed and is ever at hand for those who will use it, universal life energy. Against this supreme essence of all that is positive nothing of a negative nature can long prevail. Evil passions, destructive thoughts, perverted fancy, all the mental vermin spawned in the dark places of the human mind, loose their grip in the cleansing blaze of that power and vanish like the shadows that harbor them. Often people resort to sheer willpower in an effort to dissolve the film of evil thinking with which their own mind has polluted its abiding place. Yet the best they can accomplish by this method is but superficial, because while they may, if they are of strong character, clean up that which already exists, they cannot get rid of its source. Their life is a never-ending struggle, a prolonged effort to choke back something that presses ever more violently for expression the more it is repressed. The constant watchfulness, the sustained effort, demands so much of their time and energy that little is left for real constructive work and positive enjoyments. This is too high a price to pay for the results achieved. Something repressed is not eliminated, it is merely aggravated by being cut off from adequate expression. The individual who resorts to willpower tries in effect to sit on the safety valve of a mental boiler instead of extinguishing the fire under the boiler. His task becomes more difficult every moment, and when at length the growing pressure under him exceeds his strength to hold it back, the explosion will be vastly more destructive than if he had fumed his way through life letting off the steam of his temper and disposition a little at a time. The only effective way for killing once and for all the menace of that boiler in your mind is to kill the negative fires under it. The one power which negative cannot withstand is obviously the power of the positive, or universal life energy. If you make the contact with that force whenever you feel the rising heat of rebellious emotions, drenching in its cool stream those inner fires of evil, you will extinguish them utterly, leaving yourself calm and free to cope with the situation that confronts you. The energy that would have been burned up in destructive vibrations aimed against yourself is then transmuted into positive vibrations that arm you more completely against the condition you must meet. Universal life energy also accomplishes a work of far more deep and lasting significance to you than the mere transmutation of negative vibrations into positive ones. People of an inflammable temperament build that characteristic into their physical constitutions. Nerve channels are modified to fit that trait. They establish within themselves a predisposition to negative passions, just as a confirmed toper creates within himself a weakness for drink. These channels, open doors for the disharmony you are seeking to wipe out and only too ready to admit the evil ever seeking entrance, are gradually closed by constant use of the harmonizing universal power. This process, of course, like any other natural process of growth or healing, is not a sudden one. Change in nature is never abrupt, and change in this respect also is no exception to the rule, however strong may be the power you use. It will be proportioned to your capacity to absorb universal life energy, but to expect a rapid transformation of so fundamental a thing as your character is to expect the unnatural if not impossible. Two ingredients are essential in the prescription you fill from the laboratory of nature: patience and perseverance. The negative condition fostered by a lifetime of indulgence requires a reasonable measure of time to be undone. As your improved state of consciousness molds the stiff clay of your physical apparatus to its altered contours, the distortions which once served so well the disharmony demanding expression through them will dwindle away, conforming to the mental peace, harmony, health and power that reign within. Recognition of the dominant role played by mind in controlling the physical body will bring about a new and truer perception of all organic troubles. They will fall naturally into two classifications: those originating in the mind of the individual himself, and those winning access from outside through the mind's weakness and inability to repel them. In the first instance, where a mental condition produces an organic disturbance, the body is made the direct victim of the mind. There is no intervening agent between the two. The physical cloak simply molds itself obediently to some mental disfigurement. This is in contrast to the second instance, where the mind, through depletion of its forces, lacks the power to protect its body against the intrusion of destructive influences from without, such as uncongenial atmospheric conditions, germs, microbes, poisons, etc. The most common of these two sorts of affliction are those arising from the mind's lack of power to protect the individual from outside influences. The reason diseases make such headway is due to the fact that they themselves induce in the patient a mental atmosphere favorable to their growth. They produce a subconscious mental reaction of fear which not only cuts off the vitality of the patient, but thereby renders his mental ground an ideally adapted field for the cultivation of that negative impression planted there. If that negative impression could find no favorable conditions to nourish it, diseases caught from some outside source would remain simply irritations, readily overcome by the individual's own normal supply of vitality. But disease germs are the embodiment of negative, drawing their animating power from destructive vibrations. The negative impressions produced by these vibrations on the patient's mind is the spring which feeds them, corrupting the very energy which should be used to combat them into a vicious stream to sustain and promulgate their growth. If this ruinous reaction continues until the natural fund of health of the individual is overbalanced, he becomes the sure prey of the disease. If on the contrary the reserve of health is strong enough to turn the tide eventually, the positive flow will gradually re-establish itself, the fear will be slowly eaten away, and the disease will be driven out as the body's cells resume once more their proper function. In every case fear is the presiding genius under whose banner sickness makes its raids. A strong, well-balanced body governed by a healthy mind is practically impervious to the attacks of all negative external influences. The positive radiation from the body's cells is a wall that no destructive forces can storm successfully. But once fear enters, it chokes off the fount of energy within. The wall crumbles away as its support is drawn off, and is no longer a defense against the invaders. So also when the organic disturbance has its origin in the mind of the individual, fear in some aspect is the giant root which anchors it there. Everyone has at his disposal the power to purge his mind of the negative condition that is reflected in his physical self, but a deep-seated conviction to the contrary prevents most people from taking advantage of it. Once that conviction is really broken, the root of the trouble is also broken and the disharmonious condition fades quietly away. Obviously, therefore, the problem of prevention and cure of all physical ills centers upon mind. Organic troubles which have their source in mind must patently be corrected in mind, while diseases which come from outside can gain access only if the mind of the individual is not performing its function properly. Knowing this, diagnosis of all ills, and their correction by combined mental and magnetic treatment, becomes comparatively easy. Universal life energy is a harmonizing agent which penetrates at once to every disharmonious cause, no matter how deeply rooted it may be, and with intelligent direction through mind force it accomplishes what physical remedies never could, restoration of harmonious conditions both on the material plane of effects and on the mental plane of causes. Two aspects of treatment by this method are to be taken into consideration, self-treatment and treatment of others, but both start from one and the same basis, universal life energy. It is therefore absolutely essential to make the mental contact with universal life energy before undertaking any further step in a treatment. Then, whether you are treating yourself or someone else, you have at your disposal from the very beginning that great healing power, and you also derive one other exceedingly important advantage, self-protection. A strong flow of life force, pouring out through every cell, forms about you an aura or atmosphere of positive radioactivity which is impervious to all negative vibrations. Thus, especially if you are treating a person with a very pronounced negative condition or disease, you shield yourself completely from any transference of that condition to yourself. When treating others, have your patient comfortably seated in a chair. Then take a position behind him and place your hands on his shoulders in such a manner that the two thumbs rest together on the seventh vertebra, or joint of the neck, while the fingers of either hand repose lightly and naturally, collar fashion, on the shoulders. But if the patient's condition confines him to bed so that this disposition of the hands is inconvenient, simply take his left hand in your right one and pour the life force through that point of contact. In cases where the patient cannot be touched, direct the force into his body by extending the hands with the fingertips pointing towards him. Space is no obstacle for universal life energy, so the magnetic treatment can be just as effectually administered in this way, although it is perhaps a little less comfortable for the operator. The physical aspect of the procedure thus taken care of, there is the more important mental aspect to be considered. You have established the communicating channel through which to deliver the medicine, but the size and consistency of the dose you wish to administer will be determined by your mental work. You must achieve the proper mental attitude towards your patient and thereby attain a state of consciousness in sympathy with the harmonizing power you use before it will respond abundantly. Therefore try to feel loving. Cultivate relaxation with its attendant sense of peace and confidence. Give free rein to the expansive, positive emotions which measure their strength by the absence of strain and effort. As the tension lapses in every direction, so also does every nerve and fiber become constantly more open and sensitive to the influx of universal life energy. Do not let fear creep in to interrupt this process. No matter how serious the case may be, you have no excuse to doubt your ability to cope with it. Understand that you are merely an impersonal agent, a connecting channel between the patient and that harmonizing power which no negative can resist. Remember always that it is this power, supreme and invincible, which does the healing work, and not yourself. To fear for it is not only presumptuous in the extreme, but it promptly cuts you off from contact with it. You cease to be a channel, and your patient, instead of tapping through you the great source of all harmony, taps only the disharmony which fear has created in your own mind. Also, never permit yourself to make a reality of the disease you are treating. That is to say, never let your vision stop at the bare fact, the physical effect, of the disease itself. See always the mental cause, the negative condition implanted in the subconsciousness of the individual, of which the sickness is simply the visible manifestation. Your concern is not with physical effects, it is with the cause back of the effect, which you can eliminate through the proper use of universal life energy. This perception of causes defines the difference between combined mental and magnetic healing alone. No knowledge of the trouble is required in using universal life energy by itself. That power has the quality of seeking out flaws and adjusting disturbed equilibrium automatically. But that process is accelerated if, through a knowledge of the fundamental cause of the disharmony, the operator is able to awaken in his patient an understanding of how he has erred from his own basic harmony, thus rendering him more receptive to that healing stream which will correct the fault. In order to discover these causes, you will diagnose the disharmonious vibrations proceeding from them. Therefore use universal life energy to render yourself as sensitive as possible to all outside impressions. Let it so stimulate your perceptive faculties that, like a photographic plate, you register instantly and accurately all the negative vibrations continually emanating from the center of disturbance in your patient. Put yourself en rapport with him, and presently you will begin to perceive consciously in some way those negative vibrations. Exactly how they will be sensed will depend on the nature and disposition of the operator. Some contact them sympathetically as physical pain in the same part of the body, others will record them mentally, just becoming aware of the kind, degree and location of the trouble. All will realize within themselves, beyond possibility of doubt, when they have properly analyzed the condition. But diagnosis of the physical condition is not enough. By the same method, try to push your investigation further, penetrating deeply into the subconsciousness of your patient to the mental or emotional conflict there. This will be more difficult than discovering the physical symptoms, but of incalculable value in the work of healing. Practice will gradually develop within you the ability to diagnose negative conditions, until later you will be able to do it in a few moments or even instantaneously. There is one contingency to be carefully guarded against during this process. When you open yourself to the negative vibrations coming from your patient for the purpose of analyzing them, so that you feel within yourself for the moment the ailment which you wish to cure, do not let yourself fear that the condition has been transferred to you permanently. It has of course been admitted temporarily, but if, during the brief time it is within you, you allow fear to close up the channels by which it entered, you will lock it securely within yourself. Just retain full control of yourself and let the negative impression be expelled in the natural way, fading out as easily as it crept in. After this analyzing process has been properly accomplished, the operator is fully armed and ready to go further. His problem now is to break down the negative wall which the patient has built between himself and the supply of life force. The operator might be said to act as a siphon over that wall, an emergency contact through which universal life energy is poured into tissues starving for lack of it, while at the same time attacking the obstruction which prevents the patient from maintaining his own contact with it, fear. Fear of his illness is the invalid's yoke of bondage to it. Your problem is to strike off the burden of that conscious or unconscious dread. Therefore give to the vibrations you send forth a mental edge that will bite deep into that negative emotion of which your patient is the victim. State silently that there is nothing to fear, that peace, confidence, strength and harmony are supreme in the body under your ministrations. Once you have broken the deadening grip of that fear, your battle is more than half won. The barrier behind which disease and disharmony have flourished undisturbed is raised away, the negative condition is exposed to the healing force you are able to supply. Taut nerves relax, fresh life surges along their length, Interest and hope revive, as your patient slowly opens himself to the invigorating stream of harmony from without. This is the favorable moment to hasten matters by starting the scientific treatment. Realize as strongly as possible within yourself the fundamental perfection of your patient. Pierce beneath the crust of his imperfect human nature and perceive clearly his true, eternal status as the visible manifestation of the great causeless cause itself, the one source of all harmony and power. Know that you link him for the time to this universal force from which he has erred and that it is pouring through you into his body, there to be absorbed by a thirsty life center and distributed richly to the diseased organs or tissues. In this work do not try to visualize perfect body organs in place of the diseased ones. The body is merely an effect, while your concern is with the cause back of that effect. See the physical self of the individual as it really is, an aggregation of vibrations which have entered within the range of your perception, and which are now marred by the intrusion of some destructive vibrations which it is your task to eliminate. This you do by re-establishing within your patient a consciousness of his own eternal identity with the infinite harmony from which he came, and of which he is a part. Do not try to use willpower in treating a patient. No one can be hypnotized into permanent health. As soon as the suggestion imposed by your stronger mind upon the mind of another is allowed to relapse, the negative condition which your sustained effort was able to subdue bursts forth worse than before. You cannot force a sick person into a permanent state of health, any more than you can lift a rock into the air and expect it to stay there of its own accord when you withdraw your hand. Your function is to supply what your patient has lost, a realization of his own eternal, fundamental harmony. The shell of negative beneath which he is wilting away, like a plant barred from sunlight by a never grimier pane of glass, is, after all, a very brittle obstruction. Within your patient is still the harmony that will always be represented as long as there is one healthy cell left. Outside is the measureless tide of all harmony. If you sound again, and strongly, the note of that harmony, the law of vibration determines that it will draw a corresponding response from within your patient. The contact established, that vibratory chord will swell in volume until between the two the film of discord is shattered and swept away. It is apparent, therefore, that your mental work does not heal the individual directly, but stimulates him to heal himself. It arouses his higher self, gradually driving off the fear which he has allowed to close his inner doors and restoring him in a natural fashion to his normal contact with universal harmony. This method, which merely promotes and emphasizes definite processes of nature, is the only scientific one which can be safely and unreservedly applied without any danger of hurting your patient or trespassing on his moral rights. It has the advantage over all other methods of being thorough and permanent, securing its results by building up in the individual the natural channels through which those results should be obtained. Thus it develops in him the strength to maintain the health you were instrumental in helping him to achieve, and is for that reason alone incomparably superior to such artificial devices as hypnotism, suggestion or autosuggestion. Next in order if not in importance in considering the question of mental treatments is healing at a distance. Frequently the patient whom one wishes to help is not within reach, yet that is no obstacle where mental and magnetic vibrations are concerned. Distance is easily and effectively overcome in absent treatments, which can be administered in two distinct ways. The first of these, and the one most commonly employed, is as follows. The operator first establishes a connection or rapport with the distant patient by thinking of him very strongly for a moment. The activity of the concentrated thought in linking the two principles across space, as explained in previous lessons, provides an ample channel over which vibrations can be sent. By means of this connecting line, the mental treatment can be delivered just as if the patient were actually present, the vibrations in the form of healing thoughts proceeding from the telepathic apparatus of the operator and reaching the patient over any distance, there producing their constructive results. This method of absent treatments is the one generally used and most widely known. Yet while it is a good method, it exploits only half of the possibilities open to those whose interest is broad enough to include the source as well as the effects of mental power. Mind alone is a battery whose strength diminishes with use. But mind connected with the dynamo of universal life energy is a battery whose power is increased the more it is drawn upon. Therefore by combining the mental and magnetic treatments the operator is able to accomplish far more, and do it much quicker, than if he uses the mental treatment only. Such a combination can be effected in the following manner: take some material object which will serve as a substitute for the absent patient, preferably a pillow. With this, seat yourself comfortably in a chair, relax, enter into silence and make the mental contact with universal life energy. Then, when you feel the force flowing through you, direct it with the following mental activity into the pillow. Holding the pillow on your knees, grasp it at one end so that a corner projects like the head of an individual, with your hands disposed below it as if resting on a human neck and shoulders in the usual way. Then think very strongly of the patient whom you wish to treat, but do not think of him as absent. Think of him as being right there under your hands. Imagine the pillow which represents him to be actually his physical self, a living presence of flesh and blood and sinews. The more vivid you are able to make this concept, the more completely you will succeed in dissolving the identity of the pillow into the thought image of which it is the nucleus, and the better will be the treatment. Then proceed exactly as if you were treating a present patient. The results of this process will be as follows: the invisible mental line which you first established by your thought of the patient will form a connecting link between him and the mental image of him which you have invested the pillow in your hands. Over that mental line will flow not only the vibrations of universal life energy, but also all the different vibrations peculiar to the physical as well as the mental constitution of the patient. He will literally pour himself across space, spilling into that mental image of himself represented by the pillow just as electricity spills into a light bulb. But as each corresponding center of vibrations is established in the mental image, that center retains its direct connection with the original part instead of using the one communicating channel over which it first came. In other words, that first magnetic line splits and multiplies into millions of separate lines, every one with its own distinctive rate of vibration as determined by the particular organ or center from which it emanated. Thus between the mental image represented by the pillow and the distant patient himself grow up numberless mental lines, so that to all intents and purposes the image becomes really an extension of the individual, a living personality differing from its source only in that it is not encased in flesh and blood. Therefore you have actually under your hands, not a pillow, but the patient himself. The pillow is simply a material object whose purpose is to help you build around it and to offer the resistance necessary to stimulate your sensory nerves. Now when you pour the healing force into that pillow, you really pour it directly into your patient, because each of those millions of connecting lines acts as an open channel carrying it to him direct. You are no longer restricted to one mental link between him and you, as is the case when mental healing alone is used, but you are treating him across space just as richly and fully as if you were in immediate physical contact with him. In this way you can treat at any distance, with results that will surpass your greatest expectations. Not only are such combined mental and magnetic treatments just as effective as present ones, but they possess one decided advantage that makes them in a way even better. There is no necessity, when treating across distance, to use part of the healing power of universal life energy to protect yourself. The negative vibrations of your patient, while sufficiently strong to be represented and to form a communicating channel between him and your present mental image of him, are not strong enough to invade your own field of healthy vibrations. Therefore, instead of employing some of the current of healing force to shield yourself, you can pour the full amount of physical and mental power at your command into him. The destructive influence of the trouble you are trying to eliminate from him is reduced to a minimum, while the constructive energy you are able to bring to bear to counteract it is increased to the maximum. In another respect also such absent treatments tend to have the advantage over present ones, due to the fact that you cannot see your patient. Very often, especially in acute cases, the sight of suffering and physical anguish so impresses a sensitive healer that he unconsciously begins to dread the trouble he is supposed to overcome. The moment he entertains fear of the trouble he makes a reality of it, thus cancelling the very basis on which the whole treatment is conditioned. The evil he is trying to eliminate must become unreal to him before he can treat it, to say nothing of correcting it altogether. But in treating an absent patient through a mental image of him as represented in a pillow, all the visible evidence of the negative that afflicts him is avoided. Physical agony and suffering does not and cannot impress the healer, no matter how sensitive he may be. This, together with the absence of any necessity for protecting yourself, gives the combined mental and magnetic treatments just so much more of a positive margin over the same treatments delivered to a present patient. All that has been said so far has been of a specific nature, dealing with instances where negative present in all mankind has come to a head and broken out into physical manifestation in some. Yet if it is necessary to protect yourself against the destructive influence of one individual in whom the negative is more pronounced, it would seem as if there was a real need to protect yourself against the lesser but more constant negative vibrations emanating from all people among whom you live. This is in fact the case. Every individual is continually bombarded by all kinds of thought vibrations proceeding from those with whom he comes in contact. This is particularly true when a certain number of people are gathered together. None may be conscious of those mental intrusions, yet each one is to a certain degree affected by the different thoughts coming from the telepathic apparatuses of the rest, and each one affects the others with the thoughts sent out by him. A distinct mental tone tends to emerge, the average of all the thought vibrations contributing to it. These thought vibrations, penetrating through the pituitary body to the solar plexus of the individual, produce there an impression on the subconsciousness. If they are of a high quality, coming from people of a high, thinking type, that impression will be a constructive one. If, on the contrary, they emanate from a lower mental type, they are seeds of evil weeds that will someday grow out and cause you considerable trouble. The general level and quality of thought among crowds is usually not high. Therefore it is advisable, when in the vicinity of people whose thought is of rather dubious quality to you, to take measures to protect yourself. Make the contact with universal life energy and then know that its positive radioactivity is an invulnerable barrier to negative thought vibrations of any kind. Build a sheltering wall of constructive life force through which no destructive mental intruders can penetrate into your subconsciousness. Open yourself to that protecting power and pass serenely, unscathed, through whatever evil fogs of thought beset your path. By all means do not fear, in establishing that mental self-protection, that it will not work. To admit fear is to prevent it from working. Universal life energy is impelled by its own laws to perform its function strictly in accordance with those laws, regardless of any human interference. You have the choice only of opening yourself to it by attuning yourself to the same impersonal laws, or of closing yourself against it by opposition to those laws. Fear is the enemy who cuts you off from contact with that power. You are like a light bulb set amidst encroaching shadows of evil which drift down from every side. As long as you remain open to the current of universal life energy, so that it glows into positive expression through you, those shadows can never invade your life. But when you let dread of them contract your nerve wires and break the connection, they throng ever more closely on the heels of the receding radiance, until finally they close in darkness over the last fading glimmer. When the shadows are deepest, your light should shine most strongly and constantly. Epidemics which sweep through the ranks of mankind periodically gain their momentum from the terror that heralds their approach. Yet those who are able to retain their balance, to remain cool, calm and collected during these crises, are also able to retain their own health as well as to restore the health of their less fortunate fellow beings. Use the same method of self-protection, during these times, that you use in treating any cases of contagious diseases, and you will have no need to worry. One development consequent upon combined mental and magnetic treatments may alarm you if you do not know its cause. This is, that after a marked improvement at first the condition you are treating will seem suddenly to grow much worse. Yet this is so only in appearance. As a matter of fact, this development is direct evidence that the trouble itself is being successfully eliminated. The mental treatment, combined with universal life energy, has penetrated and broken up the negative crust within, stirring it up as one might stir up filth that has settled to the bottom of a pool. It is pushing that inner evil to the surface in the process of elimination, so that while it is more acutely in evidence superficially, this is only because it is being correspondingly cleared up fundamentally. Such a phase of the mental treatments is called mental chemicalization. It is on the mental plane precisely what magnetic chemicalization is on the physical one. It is also the test period for the healer himself, because at that moment the battle reaches its crisis and demands the utmost exertion of mental forces in order to win the victory. Therefore do not be alarmed. You have reached the point where you have pricked the negative into the open and have it fighting desperately for its existence, just as anything will fight when cornered. If you let yourself be influenced, if you weaken and lose the firm, cool control of the situation that your knowledge should give you, then you court failure. It is never a kindness to have mercy on something destructive, especially at the expense of its victim, and to let the evil live is to let your patient die by just that much. The negative has to be destroyed. If the patient suffers a little during the process, it is for his own good. Therefore it would be foolish to inflict that suffering and then fail to attain the object for which it was imposed, particularly when the goal is within reach. Remain firm during that period of chemicalization, without fear and confident of success, and you will inevitably prevail in expelling the negative condition. Whether the trouble is a disease, an obsession, or any other form of disharmony, it will vanish eventually into its native nothingness, leaving the individual entirely sound, clean and healthy in every respect. Exercises. Practice relaxation, silence and the continual contact with universal life energy as the usual necessary steps leading to the new exercise for this week, called invigoration. Invigoration is accomplished as follows: during the silence, as soon as you feel the contact well established and the force flowing strongly, concentrate your mind on it as energy. Perceive it vividly as the quick and living current which forms the life of all things, the unseen power whose touch transmutes inert matter into something moving, sentient, able to act, achieve and create. Realize that without it your physical mechanism would be unable to stir, that sight, sound, vision, thought and all would fade like a waning ember into impenetrable night. Then see your relation to this energizing power. Understand that you are a single unit continually bathed in it as in an ocean, and that you are drinking it in through a certain especially adapted point of contact in your brain known to you as the pituitary body, or telepathic apparatus. Think of that tiny ductless gland as the mouth which feeds your whole body, pouring into brain, heart, trunk and limbs the vital fluid which glows forth through them as thoughts and activities. Know that the strength and degree of every move made depends ultimately on how well your pituitary body functions, because the secretions it puts forth, manufactured out of the life force it takes in, stimulate your brain first and through the brain your entire system. It is the switch through which the current of your life pours in, strong and bright or weakly dim, according to how well you contact it. Therefore be concerned to contact it well. Open yourself to an abundant flow. You will feel invigorated, buoyant and at the same time rested. Your thoughts will become clearer, your thinking more direct and assured, your actions prompt and decisive. Remember, you are contacting energy, which demands expression in motion, and which will not be content to dissipate itself in dreams. If the connection between thought and act has been more vague than it should have been before, it will become clear and strong now. All blurred edges will be trimmed away. Ideas will be living things to be done instead of misty pictures to be admired. The benefit of this exercise is most pronounced when you are mentally tired. That fatigue is caused by congestion of vibrations in the pituitary body in the front lobes of the brain. Your receiving apparatus is clogged so that you can neither send out nor receive thought vibrations properly, and is unable to coordinate them for clear thinking. The dispersion of this congested field can be helped if, in addition to the mental exercises, you also direct the force to it through your hands. Place your fingertips slightly touching at the center of the forehead where the pituitary body is located, hold them there until the magnetic contact is well established, then move them with a brushing motion, slowly and gently, towards the temples on each side. Continue in this way until in a few minutes you feel that the pressure is relieved. Questions and answers to Lesson 17. 1. What significant change is now taking place in the diagnosis and treatment of diseases? The significant change now taking place in the diagnosis and treatment of human ills is the shifting of attention from the plane of physical effects to the mental plane of causes. 2. What is the relation of mind to the material body? The relation of mind to the material body is that mind governs the body completely, the physical self being merely the aggregate of vibrations emanating from mind. 3. How can physical disharmonies of any sort be eliminated? Physical disharmonies of any sort can be eliminated by eliminating the mental cause which is the source of the disharmonious vibrations. 4. What is the danger of entertaining unkind or destructive thoughts? The danger of entertaining unkind or destructive thoughts is that such negative thoughts planted in the subconsciousness of their author not only corrupt first his own system by the disharmonious vibrations they send forth, but those vibrations, governed by the law of vibrations, are bound to fall back greatly augmented on their point of origin, thus multiplying the evil of which they are the product. 5. How are physical troubles classified in relation to mind? Physical troubles are classified in relation to mind, as those originating directly in the mind of the individual, and those penetrating from outside because the body lacked the normal vitality to repel them. 6. What is the chief obstacle to overcome in healing all troubles? The chief obstacle to overcome in healing all troubles is fear. 7. What is the treatment whose application in various ways is most effective in correcting ill health? The treatment whose application in various ways is most effective in correcting ill health is the combined mental and magnetic treatment, consisting in the use of mind force to aid the work of universal life energy. 8. Describe briefly the principle of mental diagnosis of diseases. The principle of mental diagnosis of diseases is the use of universal life energy to sensitize the perceptive faculties of the operator, so that he is able consciously to register and analyze the negative vibrations proceeding from his patient, and the discovery through this method not only of the physical symptoms, but of the subconscious mental causes of which they are the effects. 9. Can willpower, in the form of suggestion or any other way, cure diseases permanently? Willpower, in the form of suggestion or any other way, can never cure diseases, although for the time it may suppress the evidence of them. 10. In what respects are absent treatments superior to present ones? Absent treatments are superior to present ones, in that the operator does not need to employ part of the healing power to protect himself, but can pour the entire amount into his patient, and also in that the operator is undisturbed in his work by the sight of physical suffering and anguish. 11. What does mental self-protection accomplish for the individual? Mental self-protection wards off all outside negative influences, such as destructive thought vibrations of other people, which might otherwise intrude into one's mental field and there become a source of trouble to him. 12. What is mental chemicalization? Mental chemicalization is expulsion to the surface of the negative bedded deep within the subconsciousness of the individual, and the consequent accentuation of the trouble until the worst has been eliminated.